noticed some phenomenon that is similar to China. For instance, the very first one was the exposure to political correctness. You see, one of my professors were saying tropical people have no work ethic. And at that moment, everybody's face was, they had a shocked look, and some of them had the amused look. I was saying, this is a free country. I know, everybody is entitled to say whatever on his mind. And how come it is similar to a communist country? And this happened to in a capitalist country, supposedly the opposite. And then when I started to teach, and I noticed more of this, similar or disturbing phenomenon. For instance, the textbooks that were used were full of propaganda and full of revised history and non-truths. And I was talking to my colleagues about that. For instance, some history book was saying that the Great Leap Forward, which was launched by Mao, supposedly to catch the Americans, catch the British in 10 years and overtake America in 15 years. He was dreaming, because of this stupid policy, and it causes a great famine. Internationally acknowledged, now acknowledged a death toll that reaches as high as 40 million to 60 million. But some of the textbook at that time claimed that there was 15 million people died. And it was done out of good intention.
Welcome back to Be Not Afraid, a podcast dedicated to lifting the dissident voices, the everyday heroes who stand for truth. Today, my guest is Qiru Walder. Qiru grew up under Mao in communist China, and she's written the book Dragon Elegy, which I highly recommend getting. Welcome, Qiru.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
The first thing that I wanted to talk about was, I'm hoping that you can paint a picture of what China was before Mao.
Okay. Well, ever since the communists took over of China in 1949, the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and freedom of the press were just on paper only. And we gradually lost them. At the beginning, we still had this some freedom. For instance, an upper middle class family like mine could still go to concerts, museums, operas, galleries, or ballet, or resort that was still open to the public. As the communists take over, they just took a lot of the public resorts for themselves and close it to the general public.
So can you clarify? Because I think that a lot of Americans have this view that we have a very kind of fairy tale view of what China looked like. I see a bunch of tea gardens and waterfalls and women in beautiful. I didn't have any idea that the Chinese had ballets and museums and things that we would consider westernized culture.
And upper middle class like mine were very pro-Western, pro-American, pro-British. They were the first group of people that were pulled out of the Chinese mindset and started to learn from the West and accepted Western culture and Western system. Everything Western was so beautiful, so advanced. and so refined. So that was why my family were all drawn to that kind of culture. Before the Cultural Revolution, those performances, facilities, and galleries and the displays were still allowed to exist. But when the Cultural Revolution started, all of them were closed down because everything Western is bad, and everything culture is bourgeois or feudalistic or revisionist, anti-communist. They complete this takeover through rule by terror, and mainly through 5 means. For instance, the first one was the political campaign year after year. And they didn't control the entire country at once. They did it. They did it. They persecuted and they cleansed one class after another. So, for instance, the very first campaign was a land reform campaign. It was aimed at land-owning class people. So they confiscated their land properties and put them on a summary trial, which was a trial during a mass rally. After you were denounced and then physically beaten, they just killed you in the so-called summary execution.
And how much land did you have to be considered a landowner?
It varies greatly, because in the northern part, in the relatively backward parts, the land was not fertile and the production was not high. But in the southeastern part, and the land was very precious because those people were hardworking, very creative, land was fertile. So in the south, a little bit of land, maybe acres, you could be considered as a landowner. But
wow.
And then they move on to the second campaign. Well, just as the other class, other group of people that thinks that, oh, okay, it has nothing to do with me, the land reform. It was the next target, maybe them. And there, the next target was suppress counter-revolutionaries. Okay.
So that's like today when they say they came for the Jews and I turned my head. They came for these people and I turned my head. And when they came for me, there was nobody to stand, right? It's a similar situation where they thought, well, at least it's not me. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, at that time, the so-called counter-revolutionaries were just ridiculous. Anybody who worked for the previous government, no matter what capacity you work there for instance, you may even be just a doorman, but your loyalty was subject to question, to examination and interrogation. Okay, to make the long story shorter, in each of the major campaigns, there will be millions of deaths. And you can imagine the scale and the fear that was planted into people's heart. When there's also another campaign, 2 campaigns aimed at the capitalists and the small business owners. Even you're a small business owner, you're subject to the persecution. I need to say a lot about this. First, there's 5 means, so I'm going to jump to the next means. The next means was the class label. So in everybody has a class label decided by your birth. Okay, for instance, if your father is a landlord, okay, then your birth is your class label will be a landlord. And despite your personal status may be just a worker, because most likely, if your father was a landlord, you wouldn't even have a chance to receive any education. The best chance for you to get is to become a worker. at that time, the class label was superseded the personal status. So when each campaign arrived, and the person who has a personal status of being a worker, but a class label being a class enemy, would be subject to investigation and interrogation. And so you would never, it puts everybody in its place. And the most ingenious is that the label was not permanent. It depends on your personal behavior. For instance, today you're a poor peasant, but once you open your mouth and spoke outside of a party narrative or cross the party line, and your personal status would be changed from a poor peasant to a counter-revolutionary.
So like for me, being African American or being biracial, I have a certain status in today's culture. But when I open up my mouth and I say, yeah, I don't buy into this, it immediately negates my perceived power.
Yes, the same. Okay. The third means is the registration card. For each person, we have a registration card that records your age, sex, marital status, profession, class background, and things like that. With this card, you can then obtain grains, food, and other supplies. Without this card, you wouldn't be able to survive. So this way, it eliminates everybody's attempt to disappear from the authorities' radar. Yeah, and
you get that at birth? Is that given to you like a birth certificate? So the children have this too, or do you get this at a certain age?
Not just birth certificate. You have your occupation and everything. The basic information about you is kept in a small card. It was updated every year. And then the next means was the personal dossier. It's called the Dang'an. So everybody has two sets of Dang'ans. One is kept in the police precinct where you live. The other was kept where you work or where you study. And this Dang'an follows you throughout your entire life. And even after you die, it still has the same effect, affecting your children and children's children. And it records wrongdoings and your daily performances and your performances in each political campaign. Everything was recorded there. And even, sometimes there were the busybodies that went to the administrator and reported to them, such and such a person said something like that. True or false, they don't bother to investigate. It was recorded in your file. So there was a lot of, besides wrongdoings, there was a lot of hearsay and lots of spurious accusations.
Do you think that was brought on by jealousy? I know that in Russia, people would want someone else's apartment. And so they would go and they would make rumors about them and they would disappear. And then that apartment would become available. Was it like that?
Yes, that could be part of the situation. There were many different situations, jealousy or lots of reasons, or just trying to prove to be loyal to the party. These two files affect one's schooling. If you have some stains in your files, you wouldn't go to a good school, or you wouldn't even advance to the next level. Your job assignment, job transfer, your marriage, and a promotion, and so on and so forth. Not only of the person himself, but his descendants as well. It has a legal effect of sending someone to reform through labor farm or even a jail without a trial.
So what I'm confused about is that if you went to school, if you were allowed to go to school and have a better opportunity, then you would presumably take your education and maybe start a business or maybe.
No, there was no personal business, no chance. Everything was owned by the state. You're not allowed to start your own business.
So no one became wealthy after they went to school.
No, we were all equally poor.
What would be the point of going to school then?
Well, if you manage to if you have a good birth, good class background, a good behavior, you may be able to advance to college if your grade is also good. And after graduation, you only had a good job, and it doesn't make any difference in terms of salary. You don't make much more money at all. You never had a chance to get to do whatever you wanted to do, but whatever they assign you to do. Yeah.
I spoke to someone from Eritrea who had a similar situation. He wanted to go into computer programming and they wanted him to go into social science and have to brainwash kids. And so he decided to escape at risk of his life.
Yes.
So there's never a choice in communism, right?
Right.
That's funny because you listen to these young people talk, and they're like, oh, when communism is here, when it takes over, I'm gonna own a big farm and I'm gonna read books and, and you're
no
like,
way. Everything is owned by the state. No personal property, no personal business is allowed. It was wishful thinking.
yeah, because it seems like it's a caste system, like in India. Is it similar, where you're born into a class and you can't escape?
Well, actually, the Indians caste system was much better than the communist system, because you were just in India, you were just economically low. You never had a chance to move up. In China, they were not only economically low, you're politically low. Once you're a counter-revolutionary, you're lifelong counter-revolutionary. Your children's children would not even have a chance to advance. They wouldn't even have a chance to complete their school. At a certain point, let's say junior high school, they force you out, and then they send you to a reform through farm labor. In India, there was no class operation like oppression like this. Okay, but not in China. The next one, I think I've okay. The fifth myth was the residential committee formed by in each neighborhood, in each neighborhood and each community, there's a residential committee formed by trusted retirees and house workers of a so-called good status. That means they are workers or poor peasants with this kind of background, and they serve as the eyes and ears for the police. And yeah, in each building and each complex, there are some activists working for this committee and supervising everybody's daily life. What you wear, what you eat, who you're in contact with, what you say, and anything that displeases the activist would be reported to the police precinct, and then you will be dealt with swiftly and sufficiently. It has this kind of a committee, and the police have the power to send you to a reform through labor farm or a jail without trial.
And you said this starts in junior high, that they would go to the reform through labor farms. So that means they were 13, 14-year-olds getting sent there?
13, 14, most likely will be sent to a juvenile delinquent center, or they could be sent to a so-called work study school, which was a boarding school with high walls with barbed wire. you would
Prison?
you would never be able to get out, and then
Okay.
it's a lifelong thing. After you graduated from there, you were confined in a similar facility, work there forever, and you will never return to a normal society.
So was they use the Uyghurs are in something like that now, right? I is that pronounced wrong? The Uyghurs? Is it the Uyghurs in China? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but they're Muslims and they're in China currently, and they're in camps. Are they put in to the same camps that were used during?
At the beginning, they didn't do that. They provided actually some favorable conditions for them, because they were, in general, generally speaking, those minority were economically and culturally and educationally, they were backward. So they gave them some favorable condition and promoted them to college. And this actually was a kind of a buying them off policy.
Okay.
And then became stronger, and they gradually they developed their voices. And once you speak out against them, now you become a target. So that's the putting the Muslims in reform through labor farms was the most recent thing. Right.
I'm wondering if the same places that the Uyghurs are in today are the same buildings that they used when your family was there.
Well,
So,
yes.
Same buildings. Okay.
The more is being built because the population was keep growing, and the more and more control is applied. I have to get back to my family background.
Yes. Yeah.
We were economically higher than average people, but politically we were below average, because my father worked for the Chinese Maritime Customs Service, which was run by British later on, or run by the Americans as well. And working for an organization like that, it was considered to be an imperialist running dog. So yeah, politically we were very disadvantaged. We were belong to the quasi enemy class. And then our home before the Cultural Revolution was pretty comfortable. But nothing special like the average American working class family. But in a communist society, in a poor communist society where everybody was equally poor, we stood out. And also at the time, we had a domestic help, because my parents worked a long time, and then they came home very late. We needed someone to take care of the household chores and then cook for us. And we children came back home for lunch. In terms of school, ever since the communists took over China, they immediately began the brainwashing, the indoctrination. Children were taught at very young age, even kindergarten, they were taught to love the party and hate the previous government.
How did they teach them to do that?
Well, they would say that the party and the Mao were our saviors, and the previous nationalist government was all evil, bad, and oppressive and counter-revolutionary, right? Through literature, film, exhibition, every means. So from very young age, we were taught like that, and we also were taught to hate class enemies, and the class enemies were portrayed as evil, ugly, and everything horrible.
So were you all in the same class when you were in kindergarten? So would it be your class of lower political standing would be all in a class together, and then the workers would be in
Yeah,
another class? Okay.
yeah, the workers would be in a higher class, only in name, not economically.
But you wouldn't be in the same classroom, so you're not taught to hate the person who sits at the desk next to you.
Right, we were much lower, so we had nobody else to hate. Ourselves.
Oh.
we despise those people that were below us, like counter-revolutionary something, or landlords. we felt that we were a little better than they were.
Oh.
Okay, so from very young age, we were taught to hate, and decades of cult of personality and the propaganda had made Mao a demigod, equal to God and even greater than God. I mean, who's God? We're a communist country. They were atheists. So Mao was the best ever. That's how we were brainwashed. By the time the Cultural Revolution arrived, it was very natural. And whatever the party says, we just joined. And not me, I didn't join because I was not qualified. I mean, those people that with a good, so-called a good family background, good social status.
But throughout your book, you also didn't bend a knee to it either. There were times when you were supposed to say and do things that you didn't.
Right, because, I had an independent mind. Right. Whatever you taught me, I think, I analyze it. I don't just follow you. This was a habit that I formed ever since my junior high school. And I got into trouble because of that. It was a huge lesson. So that taught me to keep my mouth shut when I became a senior high school student. Okay. And at that time, my family were Christians at the communist takeover. But when the communists came into power, everybody was compelled to register. Anyone who was a Christian or who was affiliated with some organization was compelled to register with the government. Not even a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout could escape. Anybody who registered with the government, it became their historical stain. So anytime there was a political campaign, you were there to be the target. But my parents were fortunate because of my father's job situation. He was transferred from port to port, so he escaped. So nobody knows that they were Christians, and they stopped practice Christianity. But my grandmother was able to still practicing Christianity at home. She still read the Bible and prayed to God every day.
So Mao comes into power, and school just pretty much immediately looks differently. Or because you guys have all been taught to accept everything,
right?
But I know that the Red Guard comes into school and they take over. And is that gradual, or
it is gradual, right? As I said previously, they didn't cleanse the entire country in one step. It was a step-by-step thing. Right. First, it was a landlord class. It has nothing to do with me. Okay. And then next, a counter-revolutionary. And then the next is a capitalist and a small business owner, so it still has nothing to do with me.
So it has nothing to do with you, but when you're watching people that you know be persecuted,
Yes,
how do you feel about that?
fear. And then
But not the kind of fear that makes you stand up, the kind of fear that makes you retreat, right?
right. You don't stand up because your rights of freedom of your freedom of speech was already deprived at the time. So and then after the capitalists and small business owners, and it was the intellectual class. Okay, so by the time when Cultural Revolution arrived, there was no class to be cleansed anymore. All classes were cleansed. And now there was individual. By the time the Cultural Revolution arrived, every individual was affected. Everyone's background or everyone who has said something or did something that was not considered to be revolutionary was disclosed. So when the Cultural Revolution arrived, about 1/7 to 1/6 of the entire population was implicated. So that means it's clearly, it's not all class enemies. A lot of them were just, working class people like peasants and workers. At the beginning, it was not the way we did it and the ordinary people that participated in it, because we didn't know what to do. And then it was not what Mao desired. So Mao's wife was used to for Mao's dual purpose of the Cultural Revolution. One was to cleanse the party, the entire party of his enemies. The other goal was to cleanse the entire nation of enemies. You see, in Beijing, in where I came from, it was the political center. There were lots of high communists living and working there. So there was highly concentrated with high communist class descendants. They all concentrated in prominent schools. So my school was one of them. So the Mao's wife summoned them and instructed them to form a uniformed one single organization called the Red Guards. Right? They were similar to my age. At the time, I was 16 years old, but some of them could be younger, 12 years old, 13 years old. Yeah, they participated in this revolution. They carry the instruction back to school, and of course, they wreak havoc in prominent high schools. They beat up they single out the school administrators, teachers, and even school aides for interrogation, and force them to confess the presumed crimes.
Did people confess even if they weren't guilty?
If you don't confess, if you say, I didn't do it, they will beat you, continue to beat you until you confess, oh, I did it, because you try to avoid more torture. In my school, there was only 400 students. It was a small school because it was a school of specialty. Okay, 5 people lost their lives. 2 committed suicide, 3 were beaten to death. And then this violence was soon spread into the entire Beijing. The other high schools and junior high schools and the primary school and colleges. And then it didn't take too long. It was spread to the entire greater society outside of the school. With the information given by the police residential committee, the Red Guards went door to door, street to street, to single out class enemies and to denounce them, to ransack their homes and beat them up. In 1 month in Beijing alone, in August 1966, almost 11,000 people were beaten to death. And the homes that were ransacked, it reaches 11 million. Okay, at that time, the total population of China was 600 million. 1 out of 9 households was ransacked. And my home was ransacked, and all of relatives' homes were ransacked. Anything that had some value was taken away and confiscated. And then later on, this ransacking turned into destroying 4 olds.
What were the 4 olds?
Okay, the four olds included the old culture, old ideas, old customs, and old habits. Okay, anything that is not communist is anything that was beautiful, eye-pleasing, and ear-pleasing was considered counter-revolutionary, was considered a bourgeois, a capitalist, feudalistic. Not even flowers and trees could avoid this. In this movement, countless ancient buildings, historical sites, memorial sites, and statues, monuments were overturned and destroyed or dismantled.
So they didn't just take what they wanted, they also destroyed things within the home, right? Like
Right.
they left homes in shambles.
Right. Anything they don't like, anything that is, because they were educated by the communists, they were brainwashed, they were communist descendants. So anything they don't like, anything they have never seen was bad. They either took it for themselves, or they confiscated or destroyed it.
So there was just a meanness. It wasn't just about going about and doing a mission. It was about crushing the spirit of the people in the homes.
Yes. And then, as I said, in 1 month, almost 11,000 people were beaten to death.
By children.
Yes, by children, teenagers.
The people, I'm jumping way far, but the people who were part of this, the people who were part of the Red Guard, who participated, do they, as a whole, do they have remorse for it now?
Do they have what?
Remorse.
Oh, no. Nobody has ever said anything wrong. And for the people that had a little courage to say something, was only to choose the lightest thing, the lightest act that they have ever done, and confess to that and feel sorry for that. But nobody is responsible for the death of anybody else.
Wow. It's an interesting thing that we don't hear these stories in our schools. It's an interesting thing that I have to be in my 40s before I can dig deep into these conversations, and our kids don't know them. A chapter in a 10th grade history book does not do it justice to what it was, nor does it show the parallels of what we're seeing today.
Oh, well, after I came to this country, I've noticed some phenomenon that is similar to China. For instance, the very first one was the exposure to political correctness. You see, one of my professors were saying tropical people have no work ethic. And at that moment, everybody's face was, they had a shocked look and some of them had the amused look. I was saying, this is a free country. I know, everybody is entitled to say whatever on his mind. And how come it is similar to a communist country? And this happened to in a capitalist country, supposedly the opposite. And then when I started to teach, and I noticed more of this, similar or disturbing phenomenon. For instance, the textbooks that were used were full of propaganda and full of revised history and non-truths. And I was talking to my colleagues about that. For instance, some history book was saying that the Great Leap Forward, which was launched by Mao, supposedly to catch the Americans, catch the British in 10 years and overtake America in 15 years. He was dreaming, because of this stupid policy, and it causes a great famine. Internationally acknowledged, now acknowledged a death toll that reaches as high as 40 million to 60 million. But some of the textbook at that time claimed that there was 15 million people died. And it was done out of good intention. It was, I was talking to my colleague. They were making fun of me and ridiculed me and called me right-winger. And then I said, in a communist country, being on the right side was bad. And how come in a capitalist country, the opposite of a communist country, and being on the right side was still bad? Something's wrong there.
Right.
And then when George W. Bush's No Child Left Behind, and the teaching standard was lowered. And by the time Bill Gates took over, it was even worse. Okay, because the money that he gave that made him a huge expert and an authority. He had the right to say whatever he wanted to say, and he could do whatever he wanted to do. So he installed the Common Core standard and the cooperative learning, which further lower the teaching standard and take away the students' personal responsibility. Yeah, everything was cooperative learning and done in a group, and there was no right or wrong answer.
And no room for excellence, right? That's the issue, is that there's no room for excellence when you take away.
No, the good students, ambitious students, they couldn't advance because the questions were stupid and laughable. And the answers were laughable because there was no right or wrong. Not even math has a right or wrong answer. That's horrible. And then the so-called group work actually was done just by a few students. And then most of them just sit there and doing nothing but talk and misbehave.
I'm in that age of life right now where my son is the age that once in a while they get a group project and he just rolls his eyes because he knows that he and a few other kids are going to do it, and there's going to be 3 kids who are going to do nothing, and he will do their work too, because if they get a bad grade, all of the kids get a bad grade because they break it up. They give them a total grade, but then they also break it up to each part.
Right.
And so if one child doesn't do it right.
Yeah, the whole group got the same grade, same passing grade. So everybody got passed, and then the Bill Gates' power was so great because of his money, and then he was dismantling the high schools. And for instance, my previous high school was 6 floors, and each floor turned into one small school. And that resulted in lots of administrators and less teachers. And the teachers were anxious, they have to look for a job. You know, in my previous school, there was a very good high school. And then after that, I was assigned to teach in the Bronx. It was which was a slum area in the Bronx. It was terrible. The kids couldn't even write one single sentence correctly, and couldn't even speak one sentence grammatically correct. It was horrible. And they got all passed. I was there teaching the senior class, and supposedly I teach them the Animal Farm. They are clueless what Animal Farm was about. and then that was a year 2010, and then 2 years later, Obama was elected and became worse. Oh my God, the community there was riotous. The hallway, in the school hallway, was full of communist flags, like as I said, the Soviet Union flag, the CCP flag, and Marx, Lenin.
What was that like for having escaped that, having been through? And we'll go back and talk about the hell that you went through, but to have to watch it again here, what was that like?
You know, there was the Marx photo, huge photos, and Stalin's, Lenin's, Mao's, Castro's, Che Guevara, and Obama's huge photos in the hallway. And there was even open call for rise up against the system. It was that bad. You know, it was terrible. You know,
I think it's interesting that there were posters of all of these communists and a flag of Obama.
Oh yes. Right. Yeah, I know. And at the time, you know, Bill Gates was trying to replace all the teachers because all the teachers were hard to control. They still retain their independent mind. So the new graduates, they were totally educated with the Marxist communist agenda. So they were easy to control, and then they can continue to teach the next generation and pass along the Marxist communist agenda.
And this was in 2010?
2010 that he started to replace the old teachers. And then in order to get rid of the old teachers, they started to look fault. And they go to your class, they observe you almost every day, you know, with the chairpersons from this department, that department, all go in there giving you a U rating. So that means there was no bias there. You were rated within U. That means you're not a qualified teacher by all the chairpersons. So it was not, you know, one single administrator aiming at you. And at the same time, they made up the excuses. For instance, they accused me of beating students with my cane. I mean, it's ridiculous. For 20 years, I never touched anybody. And all of a sudden, near my retirement years, and I started to beat the students up in order to get myself fired and have my pension taken away. You know, it's just ridiculous. And I couldn't take it anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they you know, they also examine your teaching lesson plan every day, every single day. You know, you have to sit with somebody and show them your lesson plan. That was
so then are we pushing out good teachers by asking for accountability?
Yes. That's for sure, because in my previous school for 20 years, I have the highest passing Regency examination grade. You know, 1 year I had a 100% passing rate. Yeah, that was you know, the Regency examination was set by the New York State. It was a very high standard back then. You know, the students have to be able to to listen and read and compose, in a very sophisticated way. And all of a sudden I became an incompetent teacher. So to avoid being fired and lose my pension, so you just took an early retirement and then paid less, but it's worth it. So
it's hard to figure out how to support the good teachers, but also keep an eye on and know when politically biased, indoctrinated teachers are coming in to do the same to our kids.
Right.
It's a hard place to be in as a parent right now. You just sit there going,
it is. Right. Teaching is a hard job. A lot of teachers quit. Even young teachers, after a few years, they quit. Couldn't take it anymore. In my school, there was a nice white girl from Long Island. Very gentle, very sweet, very kind, very nice. And in a year, oh my God, you look at her face. Totally
ate her alive.
Contorted. She was miserable and angry. In 3 years or 2 years, she quit.
Yeah. I have somewhat of an understanding because I go into classes a lot. And but I specifically go in as a substitute or as a parent. And when I go in, my job is just to be as joyful and as happy and as easy for the kids as I possibly can be. And I love that some schools are set up that way to have people who specifically, that's their job. It's hard because that all of this crazy stuff is happening. That our kids are on the front lines of it. Our kids, we're standing on the line between embracing communism or not. And yet,
but I'm glad it was just like hell. And then after my retirement, I resumed my my writing project, the memoir. And at the time, the antifas were already in place. And with one group in Seattle calling themselves Red Guards, they were the craziest one. Seattle was a crazy place. All the leftists and crazy loons got there.
I lived there. I lived there when it happened.
And then they rioted. And then I was very alarmed at that, from the flag they carry was a Chinese Communist flag, Soviet flag, was they even call themselves Red Guards, but not for no reason. It was obviously the Marxist, Communists, and the CCP were behind them. Yeah, they were training them and financing them. And and I realized, that was not some single isolated riot. The purpose was to spread the prayer fire throughout the entire nation. Their final goal was to have the complete communist takeover of the country. So, I decided to finish my manuscript and then warn American people of the danger of a communist takeover. Americans, a lot of them are pretty naive. They think this is the worst that they could get. Oh, no, it is not.
Right. So let's jump back there. Let's jump back to how bad it got there. You were sent to a camp at one point. So let's jump back. So you're in school. You said 5. So 5 of your teachers, 5 teachers or administrators were killed.
Yeah.
And what was it like being a student under that?
Well, even students could be killed. You can, okay, I'll give you some example. There was a beautiful girl, and she was a gold medalist from another prominent high school. She was beautiful, talented, and followed the party line. But when the Cultural Revolution started, the bad students were jealous of her. She had a similar background as me. Her father also worked for the Chinese Maritime Customs Service, so that was considered imperialist running dog. So with this excuse, back then, any student who was a good student was ridiculed because they follow the bourgeois line instead of the party line, paying attention to the studies instead of politics. So she was persecuted, beaten up, and she couldn't take it anymore. And then one day, she at a chance, she got out, and she ran towards a train. She meant to kill herself, but she didn't. The result of which was that she lost several fingers, and there was a huge 1 foot long scar that runs from the frontal face to the back, and she was disabled, permanently disabled, and her entire life was ruined. And I can use myself as another example. At the beginning of the Cultural Revolution, I was raped. Back then there was no sex education at school, and no books about sex in bookstores or libraries. So most girls my age had no idea what sex was about, and how a child was produced. We thought that a man and a woman sleeping together on the same bed, a child would be. We were that naive, and I was economically was privileged, so I was protected, sheltered away from the bad things that commonly seen in the lower part of the society, the evil, the depravity. So I was clueless, unguarded, and I don't know that anybody could have any bad intention, evil intention of hurting someone else.
Yeah.
So I was violently violated. At that time, if you were raped, and the woman always bears the responsibility, because you couldn't guard against your chastity or your virginity, and you didn't fight back.
You didn't even know what was happening. You didn't understand.
But the communists, the harsh puritanical communist society, by puritanical, it was only the rules for you, not for thee.
Animal Farm, right back to Animal Farm, right?
Right, they could do whatever they want to do. Okay, but you were not supposed to do anything. Okay, so in this kind of society, the situation, the women that were raped face a much worse situation, because you were constantly denounced, publicly denounced, as a worn shoe, as a whore, hussy, whatever, trollop, rotten meat, lots of bad names. It was horrible. A lot of people couldn't take it and committed suicide. I somehow survived because, by nature, I'm an independent thinker. I don't just consider myself. Well, there was a period that my self-esteem was very low, because I thought I was bad, different from other people. But by nature, I was rebellious. The more you try to put me down, the more I will stay up. So that helped. And also,
I think we might be related.
I can tell from the way you look. And also, I'm like you, and optimistic by nature. I was able to find joy in small, simple things. A few words with someone that make me happy, and I was also able to laugh at the stupidity, the absurdity, and the irony. So that helped, right? Uh, and also, not everybody shunned away from me. They were some kind people, They a few words of comfort and some companionship that helped a lot. That not only comforted me, and then also reaffirmed my worth as a human being. So that's how I survived.
How many people do you think, I mean, you can't do this statistically, but how many people do you think really bought into the lie?
Really, what?
Really bought into the lie of communism? Like, how many people do you think really bought in versus went through the motions?
Okay, I would say about 40%. 40% of them really bought into the communist line because they were, low IQs, maybe IQ between 80 to 100, or whatever you said they believe it without thinking. And there are also some percentage that don't buy into it, but they don't care. They just want to avoid trouble.
But apathy, right?
Yes. Apathy, that's part of it. And they think that, by keeping my mouth shut and doing nothing, I could stay safe, which is not the case. Never the case.
That seems to be a huge part of the problem today. When you go and you talk to parents and you show them, I tell people so many times, because they're like, how do you know all of this stuff? I'm like, well, I listen to people who've escaped communism. And when you listen to them, when I listen to you, when I read your book, it is impossible to not see the parallels.
Yes.
And to wonder why so many people don't see it.
Right. The point is that the people that speak up are too few, and their voices are hard to find, because most people don't know it's out there.
They're being lied to. They're told, oh my gosh, that's insane. Who would believe that? While they march through the streets.
For instance, my book didn't get any publicity, and without publicity, people don't even know that it existed. Yeah, they try to keep your voice as low as possible, and keep you silent as silent as possible, and a lot of people comply to this without knowing. The more you try to comply, the more you have to lose. You concede to their demands. Back then, you see the police, and a lot of white people were kneeling in front of the Antifa. It disturbed me so much. The more you think you concede to their demands, the problems would go away. It never would, because that's not their final goal. Their final goal is to take over the entire country. Right? You give them an inch, they want a foot.
Well, and it's not just the country, right? It's all of Western civilization.
It's not Western civilization. The entire world population was like that. Yeah, you see, UN Agenda 2030. Oh
yeah.
My God!
I know.
190 some countries all signed this communist agenda. They were all bought into this.
Well, some of them are forced into it. There are countries in Africa that are told that if you don't do exactly what we say, you won't get any funding from the United Nations.
Well, for some people who are not willing to take charge of their own life, it's free money. It's free. Everything is free. Yes. They wanted that. That's the part of the problem of a part of the population with that kind of mentality. But thank God, America is not like that. America is built by American spirit.
Another thing that they do is they believe these lies. So Mao told people that if correct me if I'm wrong here because you were there, not me. But Mao told people that if you sacrifice, it's going to be better in the long run. And meanwhile, from what I understand, there was massive amounts of hypocrisy because he and his group, they still enjoyed all the spoils of Western civilization. They still had theaters, they still had all of the things that they would call the four olds, maybe not religion, but all of the things that they appreciated, they still had. They were extremely wealthy while everyone else suffered.
Yeah, Mao's claim, the communism or now the disguised communism in
Globalists.
the name of a globalist, yeah, they're actually all from the same origin and bearing the same goal, right?
Right.
And they all claim that the same thing. Okay, the short-term suffering, a long-term gain. Never the case, right? It is only for their power. Their goal is to stay in power forever.
Right.
And yeah, the people were just vehicle for them to stay in power, and we are the ones that are actually supporting and sustaining them. Thank God we are not there yet. When they wanted to turn America into another China. Everybody lives in a cage, but we're not there yet. Some people may think we are already there, but we are not there yet. So we still have a little time, and then still we have some legal recourse to explore. For instance, talking to our representatives, making our voices heard by whatever means we can. Also, each individual has to take responsibility and joining the fight, because it is not just about saving the republic. It is saving your own children's future. And the good thing is that, American spirit still exists. If everybody takes a responsibility and create their own life, yet they cannot control us. We are not, American culture is not collective culture. It is individual culture. That's very important, and that we should preserve the American spirit. If that's the case, America will be saved.
That is so. That's exactly it. I was speaking with a principal from, well, not a principal. I was speaking with the founder of a charter school, and she was saying that the people who are going to save America, so it seems right now, are the immigrants, are the refugees, the people who lived other places, ran away from that. Those are the people who are standing up and who are saying never, ever again. And it's Americans who've lived here forever, who've become complacent and who are just like, whatever's easy, don't bother me. We used to say, you will harm my child over my dead body. And now we say, as long as my kid doesn't have to wear a mask, I'm good. Do whatever you want to. And they don't understand that the harm that's coming into our kids is going to make them live under the boot of something extremely nefarious, extremely oppressive. While they fight and say, we don't want to be oppressed, they're carving the way for more oppression.
Right. The history, unfortunately, has proved the other way. The more you become complacent, the less freedom you have, and you are actually giving them the power to control you and do whatever they want to do to you.
Right. Do you still have a lot of hope for America?
A lot of, but look at this way. Look at it in an optimistic way. American Revolution started with 3%. Well, actually, it started from just a bunch of people in Lexington, Concord, in Massachusetts. And guess what? In 8 years, we won. We defeated the tyrants.
Right.
So, yeah, we just have to keep our vision, keep our mind sane, and keep our vision. 8 years, we could win. There's an example set by our founding fathers.
That's how I look at it. I'm like, okay, if we have some sort of a fourth turning and we're in the worst part of it, communism usually lasts for about, it's not that long before people wake up and say, dude, this sucks. You know, we want out, we want something different. My fear is that with the data control, with us being so plugged in, there's no way to get out of it once you agree to be plugged into it.
Well, you know, it's a difficult situation, but people like you and me are still fighting.
So they can reach, if anybody is interested in reaching out to Qiru, you can send me a message and I can get you in contact with her.
Yes, yes.
One of the things that I've really noticed is that the Chinese tend to be more reclusive, right? And less trusting of lots of things, understandably, because of what you've been through. And
it's also part of the culture.
Yeah. But there's the fact that you guys are willing to stand now should tell people how dangerous we are getting, how dangerously close we are getting.
That's exactly that keeps me on Facebook, because I just want people to know, okay, look, even Chinese are joining the fight.
Yeah.
What are you afraid of?
Right. Exactly. Qiru, this was an excellent and needed conversation. Thank you for taking the time to.
Thank you for sacrificing your own time and do this. You know, your voice is bigger than mine. We need people like you.
We just need people to find their inner strength. I think, you know, my voice really isn't any bigger. I just refuse to shut up. Well, thank you and have a great night.
You too.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. God bless.
God bless you too.